Welcome to another Maamar we're learning in the Mizgeres of Project Malukit. These Maamar are learned in honor and memory of our beloved Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Wagner. We're learning the Maamar today, Bonayich Tavshim Mem Aleph. It's a Maamar that was said Shabbos Parshas Vayishlach, Yudal Kislev, which is the Rebbe's wedding anniversary. It was actually edited Tavshim Mem Ches, which was beginning of the 60th anniversary. It's based on a Maamar Bonayich that the Frierdiker Rebbe said, a famous Maamar by the Rebbe's Ufruf, and therefore many people say this Maamar by their Ufruf. The Nekuda, the Chidush, the novelty of our Maamar is basically how the Rebbe takes a new approach where typically you would say, if I want to be mevar the world, if I want to elevate the world, I want to refine the world, I have to work with the world, right? Work with the rules of the world and really get down and dirty. Momata l'mayla. Here the Rebbe says, no, we can learn from Yaakov Avinu, from our Parsha, how you could come from above, like Torah, Pnimis HaTorah Chassidus, and you could stay above, you could stay within a spiritual realm and nevertheless have a very profound impact on the world, elevate the world. And here also the Rebbe kochs in an Indian, which the Rebbe speaks about also in the later years, where in Chassidus itself, there's a part of Chassidus which is here to refine a person, obviously the avodah of Chassidus. But then there's a mitzvah, Rama v'nisav, the Rebbe says it's just a mitzvah to learn Chassidus, to know the Eibusha's wisdom, even if it's just, so to speak, haskala, if it's just going to be to understand the greatness of Hashem, that itself is a great mitzvah, and in a certain sense a higher mitzvah, more connected to the Geula, where we're going to be dealing with the bir of Moichin. Let's get right in. The pasuk says, "V'chol banayich l'mudei Havayim." Rav Shalom Bonayich. There are two parts of the pasuk here. The first half says, "V'chol banayich l'mudei Hashem." Your children learn Torah. Rav Shalom Bonayich, and they bring a lot of peace. Now, there are two ways of reading what Rav Shalom Bonayich means. Maybe chak mochad mor b'maymer damatzchel zeh b'kuntus drushechasna v'shpetes. Now, the kuntus drushechasna, which is a compilation of the Maamarim that were said in connection with the Rebbe's wedding. Here he brings in that Maamar v'chol banayich, the Rav Shalom Bonayich shtei perushim. There are two ways of explaining, two ways of translating the words. The Rav Shalom Bonayich, there is a lot of peace by the children. Ha'alif. The first perush is the Rav Shalom Bonayich u'shiyerev shalom b'necha. It's like a bracha. There should be a lot of peace among these children, among Talmidei Chachamim, and that is kipirsham to Zav Targum. That is a more, so to speak, conventional pirush, the Targum, as well as the Mitzvah, which are very basic, very primary commentaries on Nach. Va'abei is the second pirush, the pirush of Shalom Bonayich u'shadei Bonayich nase ribuy shalom ba'olam. Not that they have peace, but through them there is peace brought and created in the entire world. Kamaimar Razal, like Razal teach us, it's a siyum of many mesechtes. Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. Talmidei Chachamim, their primary job, they bring peace into the world. Shnemer v'chol banayich l'mudei Hashem Rav Shalom Bonayich. It brings our pasuk to express this idea where Talmidei Chachamim, not that they have peace on their own, but they bring peace to the world. Al tikri banayich ala boynoich. How do we know this refers to Talmidei Chachamim? Because don't read the word banayich as children, but boynoich, the builders. Umevar ba'maimer dezema shetalmidei Chachamim nikrayin boynoich. Why are Talmidei Chachamim indeed called builders? The builders are the Talmidei Chachamim who are involved in Torah, which is binyan shel olam, the building blocks, the structure, so to speak, the foundation of creation. Move on. From this is understood. The Frierdiker is going to take it a step further. The fact that the Razal bring this idea of Bonayich, Limudei Hashem, and how bringing peace in the world, kumtois, that the main peace that the Talmidei Chachamim bring is not because of them being Talmidei Chachamim and them having the greatness of learning Torah. It's specifically the second Maamar Razal, which deals with Boynoich, the fact that they're builders of the world. That's where they bring peace into the world. So the Rav Shalom Bonayich specifically emphasized on the aspect of the Talmidei Chachamim that bring peace in the world. Kumtois, that really the two halves of the pasuk actually bring out two very different concepts. These are the two ideas. The first half of the pasuk that says your children learn Torah. The pirush they're involved and they learn Torah. That's the Maila, the Talmidei Chachamim. That's the greatness of being involved in learning Torah for themselves. And then there's an additional adding here where the Torah says, these Talmidei Chachamim as well have an effect. They have an impact on the world around them. They bring peace in the world, they build the world, they construct the world. That as well happens through Torah. So again, there's an advantage in the person and there's an impact that he has on the world around him. Now, in the end of the Maamar, the Frierdiker actually brings the two perushim together. We see in Maamar, through the second idea here, where they bring peace in the world, they make a true change in the world around them. Through that, they also have the literal sense where there's peace in their own life. Kamishakasuv, Ureibanim, Levanecha, Shalom al Yisrael, the Pasuk Tehillim says, you see your children and your grandchildren, you see peace among them. In other words, Talmidei Chachamim, when they truly do their job in making the world a better place, they bring peace to themselves as well. Hainu idea birur, the olam shenasa de esek haTorah, Talmidei Chachamim mimshach ribu shalom gal b'necham atzmam. So you're bringing peace into the world, you bring peace into your own life as well. Compared to the Tag Rav Shalom Bonayich, like the simple literal meaning in Rav Shalom Bonayich, that the peace is for them. So that's basically a summary of the beer in the pasuk Bonayich, according to the way the Fidei Rebbe explains it. It basically goes on the effect that the Talmidei Chachamim have on the world around them. So, V'yesh Lakasha Ze'oiz Beis, Rebbe is going to connect it to the Parsha Vayishlach, and what does it practically mean to truly have effect on the world around us? It's going to be the theme of Eis Beis, Gimel Dalid, hey, basically getting really into the story of Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim, where Yaakov sends messengers to Esav, and he's going to ask questions and challenge, and basically bring out what the avodah of Yaakov was, and why he needed the introduction of the 20 plus years that he worked in the house of Lavan. Let's get right into it. We can connect this to what it says in the Parsha Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim Fanav Esav Achiv. The pasuk says Yaakov sends messengers to Esav. This is what you should tell them. Im Lavan Gartiv Eichar Adata. I have dwelled with Lavan, and I was postponed. I was held up until this point. It seems to imply Yaakov technically should have showed up to Esav beforehand. And therefore he needs to justify his late come. I was with Lavan, and therefore I was postponed, I was held up until this point. In other words, it seems like Yaakov needs to he needs to justify the fact that he came late. And that's the Rebbe's question. Two questions at Tzarech Lavin. First of all, why in the first place was Yaakov supposed to be at Esav earlier, to the extent that he needs to, so to speak, justify? Why was he expected to be there before? Second of all, Rashi says that the letters, the word Garti also means Taryag 613. And the explanation is in Lavan Garti that in addition, even though I was among such rishus, as by a person like Lavan, who was a tremendous Russian, nevertheless I guarded and I kept, I'm complete in Torah mitzvahs. And the question is, seemingly, obviously Esav wasn't known to be a great tzaddik. He wasn't known to be a person who valued Torah mitzvahs. Why is it that Yaakov is notifying Esav about the Torah mitzvahs? So the two questions are, why does Yaakov feel a need to justify him coming late? Why would he technically supposed to be there before? And why is he telling him about the Torah mitzvahs that he kept? The explanation is in both of these answers. In truth, the story is a little funny. Yaakov wants to give brachas to Esav, Yitzchak wants to give brachas to Esav, but Yaakov steals them. The question is, how do you steal brachas? Brachas are not something physical I can just run off with, right? If Yitzchak indeed wanted to give them to Esav, they would indeed go to Esav. So what's the explanation here? The explanation indeed was the brachas were intended for Esav. Elamai, Esav, the way he was then, wouldn't be able to accept it. It needed to come through Yaakov. And that's the idea here, that brachas shebeirach Yaakov, Yitzchak's brachas that he gave Yaakov were b'chdei levaris Esav, were really eventually meant to end up by Esav, to elevate Esav, to mivar Esav, Ella, sheyuchal levaris Esav, in order for Yaakov to be able to elevate and to refine Esav, he needed to first have the avodah in the house of Lavan. And therefore, you understand both answers here. He's telling him, why did I stick around so long? Why did it take so long? Seemingly, right when I received the brachas, now I have the ability to elevate you. So why did it take so long? And to this he answered, I stayed with Lavan and I was strong with Torah mitzvahs. In other words, I was doing Avodas Hashem. Right when I finished my entire mitzvah Shamarti, I finished my Avodah in the house of Lavan. Now I'm ready to approach you and now I'm ready to elevate you. But now, Gimel, the Rebbe is going to explain now what indeed is the reason that Yaakov needed to stay so long at the home of Esav before elevating the home of Lavan, before elevating Esav. Why indeed did Yaakov need to stick around so long before elevating Esav? And the answer is, two explanations, two approaches. And there's an extensive explanation in the Hemshech Tafrei Shayin Beis, the Maamar Vayishlach. If you want to elevate, if you want to refine a person as low and as, coarse as Esav, he needed a great energy from Hashem, a great high level of oir. And therefore he needed that avoid in the house of Lavan. Lavan, according to Chassidus, which means whiteness, also represents a very high level, loiven ha'elyon, the, so to speak, the supernal whiteness, which white means basically the lack of any color or any expression. It refers to keser, which is higher than ishtalshus. Ishtalshus is already definitions, ishtalshus is already color, so to speak. Lavan is higher than ishtalshus. Through his 20 years, above 20 years, he was in the home of love, and he was able to be mamshich, he was able to utilize and bring all the energy, all the iris from Levin Elyon, from higher than Ishtal Shlus, va'ad, to the extent, he was able to combine Lavan to the sons and daughters, and the Rebbe will explain the significance. Hamshacha the Levin Elyon, Lavan is kissing, he's connecting, kissing according to Kabbalah and Chassidus is a very deep connection, is dafkus berucha is a unity, lechol inyane Yaakov, la mashpim, la mekablim, badav b'neisav, the sons and daughters represent the mashpim and the mekabel of every olam. Basically, he was able to bring the keser that's higher than ishtalshus into every level of ishtalshus. That was the avodah Yaakov did. Now he can finally go down to elevate and to refine Esav. So that's the first explanation. In order for Yaakov to come down to Esav, he needed to have the Levin Elyon higher than Ishtalshus, his great revelation of Lavan, the way he is in Kedusha. And the second explanation, in addition to being, because again, Lavan has this great Sherishing Kedusha, Mitzad Lavan Shalamata, Lavan, in addition to being very high level on high, Lavan, the way he comes down here, is a very low level, right? He needed to elevate, he needed to refine Lavan first, Lavan the Klippa. Why? The Esav Ulamata mi Lavan, because Esav is lower than Lavan. Lavanu Keser Chachma Bina, the Klippas Nega. Lavan is the intellect of Klippa. Esav hu Zayin Midas the Klippas Nega. Esav is the passion, is the Midas of Klippa, the emotions. He was working his way down. First, he can, so to speak, capture, he can utilize and elevate and refine Lavan, who is the mind of Klippa, and now he can move down, his way down to get to Esav. What's the idea here where we have to start with Lavan and then go down to Esav? Why is Yaakov working his way down? So Rebbe is going to explain. He was working his way down, from up to down. Yaakov was in a very high place and he's working his way down. Why? Because the way he was mivar was through an overwhelming expression of Hashem, of godliness, of light. Why? Ki Yaakov Torah. Kidua is brought from Gal Amukis, Shagimel Avit and Gimel Kavim Torah, Avodah Gimel Chasadim. Avram, his primary way of serving Hashem was Gemach through Gimel Chasadim, right? Achnasas Erichim, sharing. Yitzchak was Avodah, service, right? The Be'er, he was uncovering and striving. Yaakov was Torah, Yaakov was a combination, he was Tiferes, and therefore the birur, the birur, the way you elevate the world through Torah, in the reality of Torah, is from a much higher place. You're not, so to speak, getting down and dirty in the world, you're staying above world. Like in the last Maamar Pada B'Shalom, the Rebbe does elaborate in the difference between how you refine the world through davening, where you really get down and dirty, la'abir de Torah, through Torah, where you stay aloof, shabir de tefillah b'dech mat l'mayla, shlasing mizbar, you really have to deal with whoever or whatever you are elevating and refining. V'abir de Torah b'dech mayla mat Torah, on the other hand, is mamayla. You are standing, so to speak, in a higher place, and you are, so to speak, sharing from above. The Rebbe says automatically it's not just going to be a difference in the way, the approach, but also in the order. That what? If you're working your way up, so again, what are you going to start with? The lowest thing, and you're going to work your way up. Because you're under everything, you're below everything. So you're going to have to deal with the things that are most connected to you, and slowly you're going to refine yourself, you're going to refine the world, and you're going to get related to things that are a little higher, a little greater, and that's why you're working your way up. Like we understand practically, right? First you have to get rid of grubkite, and then you have to work higher until eventually you're dealing with more refined things. On the other hand, the way Yaakov elevates, coming from above, Yaakov was a tzaddik, he was an atzilus, he was coming down. He starts with the greatest, highest things, because those things are most relatable and closest to him, and he works his way down. Today, who are we more similar to? Today we're more like tefillah, we're more like mumatal l'mayla. Therefore, therefore we have to start with the lower, start with the 7 midos, and then we can move on to the moich, to the mind. Which is connected to the fact that when the Jewish people originally entered the land of Eretz Yisrael, they only conquered 7 nations, which represent the 7 attributes of 7 midos. When Mashiach comes, we'll have that additional 3, which was represented in moichin, in intellect. The Yudua Habir, the Bala Geula, the Yud Kislev, Shalid Yud Kislev, B'yei Mashab Shal Achrav, the Kibush Yeshua, Nizbar Rak Zayin Amidus, V'mech Shach Lamidus, V'gil Moshe Nizbar Lasid Lavi. Like the Mittel Rebbe, who, by the way, Shabbos Yudal Kislev is the Vayichulu, is the culmination of his Chag Geula Yud Kislev, the Chag Geula of the Mittel Rebbe. He explains that when Yeshua entered the land of Eretz Yisrael, he only tackled the 7 midos. When Mashiach comes, we'll elevate the Gimel Rishonis, the upper 3, the Moicha, the intellect. Mashiach burned the Yaakov, Shay B'derech Mamayel Lamata, Yesedish B'tchil Bir, Kesach Chachma Bina, V'achach Zayin Midos, Lavan, then Esav. Yaakov, on the other hand, he was above, he was aloof, and he was working his way down, so he starts with Lavan, starts with the mind, goes down to the heart. Now, typically, you would say Yaakov was obviously in a much greater way. He was starting in a different reality. He was doing it through Torah. But the Rebbe says, and I say, there's still obviously an advantage in the way we do it today, where we start from the bottom. Even though obviously starting from above is obviously much greater, much more revelation. Nevertheless, there's an advantage in starting from down here in our reality. Why? At the end of the day, because it's the immense revelation, it's immense which is, so to speak, imposing itself upon the world, but it's not that the world actually gets it. You're, so to speak, destroying the world. When you work your way up, you are literally working through, you're convincing, so to speak, you are penetrating every aspect of creation. They themselves agree and understand it. So when I come from above, I'm obviously showering, I'm overwhelming the world with something that is much higher than it. So it's cool, it's great. But when you work your way up, so you're actually dealing with every imperfection, with the actual reality in the terms that this world understands. Therefore, there was a certain incompletion where Yaakov wasn't truly able to complete the beer of Esav. Right? We know that Esav obviously was elevated through Yaakov. He hugs him, he kisses him. Nevertheless, he tells him, it's going to take me some time. It says that he's going to eventually Yaakov is going to meet Esav at Adeni Seira, but that will only happen when Mashiach comes. The Yaakov, Shneur, like the passage says, we're going to eventually judge the mountain of Esav, the mountain of Edim, because at the end of the day, Yaakov had that limitation where because he was coming from above, it wasn't complete. Complete also is like Shalom Shleimus, where the Tachten has to feel it as well. If it's not the Tachten feeling it, it's just one-sided, so it's not completion. Through the fact that for 2,000 years in Golus, we are working step by step, elevating every aspect, every nuance of creation. That's going to create that eventually, that's going to create eventually the complete shleimus, the beer of Esav, Yeshleimar. And now you could add that it wasn't in vain, Yaakov's avodah. At the end of the day, we need Yaakov as well, because through Yaakov breaking the shell, so to speak, Yaakov breaking the ice, and causing this bittul, so to speak, this overwhelming light upon Esav, now, throughout Golus, we have what to work with. Now we're able to slowly pick up all the different pieces and elevate it. Now that I was going to ask a simple question, 1 second. So why is the Torah telling us the whole story of Yaakov if it's not relevant to us? Again, we do the avodah b'birer mimatal l'mayla. So we did explain, right, that we need Yaakov as an introduction, but then I was going to take it a step further. At the end of the day, Torah is everlasting. Also, the instructions of Torah as well are everlasting. So, in other words, we need to take instructions from Torah, from every part of Torah. But if today we have a completely different type of avodah, so why does Torah tell us the story of Yaakov going to Esav? We already explained. Yaakov approaching Esav is very mamailadik. Seemingly, how do we take instructions? How do we get inspired from that if we're doing something very different? And even more than that, it doesn't just tell us Yaakov approaching Esav, it also tells us the introduction to that, where he came to Lavan first. In other words, he was working his way down, like the second pshat, where he starts with the mind, goes down to the heart. So not just that you're telling me that he approaches Esav, you're telling me that he came first from Lavan. How does that connect to each and every one of us today, working a very different route? Now we're going to get to the beer of our Maamar. Not just that he started the way and now we could do our avodah, but no, we have koyach from Yaakov for this unique avodah as well. Hainu, in addition to what we already said, that through Yaakov breaking the shell, now we have what to work with, so he, so to speak, laid the ground, but it's more than that. We have a koyach to do the bir identical to the way Yaakov himself did it, habir shalei Torah. Bir through Torah. Today, typically we do it through Tefillah, but no, we have a koyach from Yaakov do it through Torah as well. And then the Rebbe says, Torah gufa, habir shalei pinimis Torah. Within Torah, the true essence of Torah. Why? Because the real bir that Yaakov has, mamayla, just throwing yourself upon the world without seeing, actually, without abiding the rules of the world, that's specifically in Torah. Which is bar le'el b'dei masal marucha da bir shal denigla Torah became shel slapsha be'etzadat sevirah b'chtei levar birum b'dugmas habir b'dei matal l'mayla u'bi slapsha l'chamish and bir shal de'pitim is a Torah lan dechaya who shal b'dei slapsha mayla mata. So even though Torah in general, when you compare it to Tefillah, Torah is from above, but within Torah itself, nigla the Torah, you're dealing with a lot more technical laws, halacha. Therefore, there's questions, answers, there's toiv and ra. And there's still, so to speak, some sort of relationship you have with the world, with the rules of the world, and you're getting a little dirty down. Masha'inkein, Chassidus is completely above. When you learn Chassidus, you're in a godly reality, and therefore the way you're mevarevel through Chassidus is without getting down into the world. Now that I'm going to say that within Nigla you have two things, within Chassidus you have two things, just to get to the point where Chassidus itself, you have a higher way of learning Chassidus. What's the idea here? Mihine, Zayin. In general, Nigla and Torah split. So, by the way, we can back up. In general, it's Torah and Tefillah. Within Torah, it's Nigla and Chassidus, right? Nigla is birur and Chassidus is above. And within Nigla and Chassidus itself, now that I was going to say there's Klal and Prat, there's the, so to speak, the aspect of Nigla that's above and below, and the aspects of Chassidus are above and below. Let's see. Torah calls the Prat, and Torah in general, everything is Klal and Prat. So you'll have the Klal, and then you zoom in, you'll find details, and within every detail, you'll zoom in, you'll find more details. The Alter Rebbe explains, where the Alter Rebbe, by the way, is also related, just like we said, the Mittel Rebbe had his Chagul Yud Kislev, the Alter Rebbe is this coming week, Yutes Kislev, Shabbos Yom Nevis Baruch, and Kol Yom Shal Achram, Kol Yom Gol Yutes Kislev, our Shabbos blesses the coming days, which include Yutes Kislev. Betanya, the Alter Rebbe explains, the Limud Pnimis HaTorah, he mitzvah Rama v'nisa. It's a great mitzvah, an elevated mitzvah, to learn Pnimis HaTorah. Mevi l'leiv shalom. After a little bit, he says, and that brings to a complete heart. Hainu. There are two concepts, two ideas you're accomplishing to learn Pnimis HaTorah. First of all, it brings you to a complete heart. It strengthens your connection to Hashem. And that's, so to speak, the typical. When we learn Chassidus, we're trying to apply it and we're trying to become better people. Then the Rebbe says, Beis is a second inning here. Just learning Chassidus, even if it's not going to affect you, so to speak, is already a great mitzvah. Indian Pnimis HaTorah Shalmayla Berurim, this Pnimis HaTorah which is even higher than even refining yourself, let alone refining the world. So too, in Nigla you have two things. In Nigla you have, even though in general we say Nigla deals with the world, but you have a Nigla, the concept is higher. Certain parts of Torah aren't relevant to action, right? They're not practical. They're just there for a person to learn it and to delve within it and to receive schar. So within Nigla, you have practical halacha and you have unpractical, so to speak, above the world. So here we find how within Nigla, within Chassidus itself, you find both aspects. The limud ateish b'ksav b'avan v'asaga b'frat limud ha'yiroy shabahim malach ateish b'ksav him b'sur shabah b'negel ha'maisa shaykh lina birurim shaykh limud ha'sipum ateish b'ksav v'shem mitzad atzmam. And within Torah b'ksav you find as well you have the stories, and then you have the instructions. Instructions are a lot more, a guide for life. What do I do? What do I not do? How do I elevate the world? But then you have the stories that are literally just there as lessons and culture and a then you have something even greater than the stories, which is just reading. There's a mitzvah to say words of Torah. You make a bracha, so you have a person who's literally not even understanding what he's saying. Forget about being practical and being a guide for life. Torah is Halak, Torah is Kedusha. That aspect in Torah, which a person can literally just read the words in Mekayim, that's like the Pnimis Torah aspect, where you're completely removed, completely above the world. Like the Kutter does say, that the Gemara does say, and the Medrash tells you, Halacha tells you how a person should split his day when it comes to learning. And a third of the day is Mikra. You're supposed to be learning Tanakh. Pnimis Torah, Zohar, Kabbalah is included in Mikra because it's removed, it's Teresh B'Ksav. So within Tanya, which is Teresh B'Ksav of Chassidus, just like in the original Teresh B'Ksav, you have instructions as well as you have the words, the letters. So too in Tanya, you have the part of Tanya which can help you practically in your avodas hayetzer. It's here to literally teach you how Torah is accessible and easy. So Tanya is going to be a guide that's going to help you serve the Eibishter. How to do. So in other words, Tanya does, so to speak, in a certain sense, get down and dirty in our personal struggles and how we can navigate this complicated world. That's all when you get down in details. But when you zoom out in general, Nigla in general encloses himself within creation. Torah, Chassidus, Pnimis Torah stays above Birurim. So therefore, the Birur through Torah is going to stay above. It's not going to get down and dirty. It's not going to get nitty gritty. So there we basically said how you have Torah and Tefillah. Within Torah itself, you have Nigla and Chassidus. And then we said how within each and every one of them, you have the aspect of it that gets down to the world and, so to speak, obeys by the rules of the world. It gets dirty by the world. And then you have the part of it that just stays above. Ches. Now we're going to go back to Yaakov. V'shleimar. The K'moy Shabir Yaakov Lias Beifin Demo Mailo Lamanta Digul Elin. Hoya Gamba Seder Demo Mailo Lamanta Shabir Agim Moshe Tzavei Shabir Amides. Just like we said by Yaakov, because his approach was from above. So that was also the order. He began with the higher things. He began with the mind of Klippa. And then he moved down to Esav, which was the midas of Klippa. So too, when a person approaches the world to Pnim Satorah, Chassidus as well works his way down. Because Chassidus is like Torah, Chassidus is like Yaakov. So what gets refined first when it comes to learning Chassidus? The mind Nefesh Bahamis. Again, that's what Chassidus is. Chassidus is learning the Seichel of Hashem, and hopefully it's going to eventually move to the next step. To the extent, even not just a Moichin, which will eventually translate itself into Midos, in other words, Seichel that you're going to think about enough that's going to actually inspire you, but even just things that are not going to inspire you at any point, they're literally just intellectual. Those things as well are the birur. That's how you refine your mind. You think Chassidus, you fill up your mind, your head with holy things. Nigla is working the other way. Nigla is primarily here to affect your midas, affect the way you feel, and the way you approach the world, the way you interact with the world, and the mind which is governing the midas. Because the starting point of Chassidus is in a much greater place. It's a mitzvah ram v'nisa, therefore the birur is in the moichin be'etzem. In other words, Nigla begins as a rule book, as a guide for our world, and we're working our way up. It's the midos, it's a little bit of the moichin, it's your emotions, it's your feelings, your intellect. A little bit of intellect, the way it connects to the feelings. Because Chassidus starts in such a higher place, so the first thing Chassidus does is just deals with the mind. And even if that's never going to translate into inspiration, it's never going to affect my Avodas Hashem in a positive way necessarily, but the mere fact that your mind is thinking and occupied with godly things, that's already a birur. Moichin be'etzem. You asked me a question, okay, but that's not something that's relevant today. Only when Mashiach comes are we going to start dealing with the Moichin Be'etzem, with the Kaini, Knizu, Kadmoini, like we already said, right? Today we deal with the 7. Today we conquer, Yeshua conquers the 7 nations. When Mashiach comes, we'll conquer the last 3. Nevertheless, a little taste of what we're going to have and experience when Gula comes. Today, when we learn Chassidus, leading up in preparation for Geula, we have a taste of bitter Moichin Be'etzem. We have a taste of the conquering of those 3 last nations, which represent the intellect, the mind. And therefore, we're wrapping now up to answer our question: why is the story of Yaakov spelled out in our Torah? Not just as a preparation for us, because these are all lessons literally until today. We as well can have a bit of a taste of Yaakov's approach, of Ge'uladika approach, where we're not necessarily getting so down and dirty. We're learning Chassidus, we're thinking about Chassidus, and we're filling up our mind with godly ideas. We can add. It's also in the order of when it comes to learning. Do I learn Nigla? I learn Chassidus? Typically, you would say, what do I begin with? You start with Nigla, right? Because that's the order. And then I can move on to learn more lofty things, more esoteric things. The Arizal would first learn 6 times. He would sweat, he would toil in learning Nigla. He would first learn 6 ways in halacha, then he would get to Soid. So typically, when you think about it, the order is, first I want to learn the simple meaning, first I want to learn Pshat, then I can move on to Dash, Remez, Soid, right? Soid only comes after real toil in basic halacha, basic Nigla. Nevertheless, the Rebbe says, right? Nevertheless, the Yisoidus of Chassidus, the foundations of Chassidus need to be known in Hanocha Pshuta. It has to be set in stone. Even before you learn Nigla, you need to have the foundations of Chassidus. Because then, even the Nigla is in an elevated fashion, because again, you're a bit above. You have the foundations of Achdus Hashem, the foundations of Chassidus incorporate. What's the explanation here? The Nigla is B'chlal B'Agbola. Primus Atayru Bligvol. Nigla is limited. Primus Atayru is Hashem Himself. It's unlimited. By the idea, Canal, when a person is able to have the Yisoid, is able to have the foundation of at least the Hanocha, at least the Hanochas of Chassidus. And especially when a person actually delves into it, not just the foundations of Chassidus, but actually gets involved. And then when you really lose yourself in a wide way, you drown yourself in the yam of Primus HaTorah, then the Rebbe says, so that can actually create that your Nigla is in a different way. When your Chassidus opens your mind to Bligvul, everything becomes Bligvul. And therefore the Nigla as well is part of Hashem's plan. Everything you see, Eibush there within. And therefore, even when at times you need to get nitty gritty, you need to get down and dirty in this world, you're still a bit above because you have the foundations of Chassidus. Your mind is flooded with Chassidus. And the Rebbe says in the brackets here, what does it mean to learn in a way that's Ma'al D'Ragbola? V'pashtus. She'enim ischashim mazman, imodayim b'emsa zvan ha-seder, or ishizek far lachar ha-seder. This is aimed towards Bachrim, but even not Bachrim. It means to learn. What does it mean to learn Nigla in a way of Chassidus? What does it mean to learn in Eifin Esal Ma'al D'Ragbola? It means not to look at the time, not to look at the clock, lose yourself within a Vart Chassidus, lose yourself within a Vart of Nigla even, because again, all of Torah is included in the Bligvul when you have the foundation of Chassidus. Yud v'hine hagam dezeh mashal de'elim min ha'prim zater nasi yisrim b'lim ha'nigla ubabir shal de'zeh l'chayrin shal yirid l'gabel lim min zater k'moishim tzad atzmi. I asked me a question. 1 second. So you're telling me that the foundations of Chassidus are going to create that my nigla will be more proper, right? So my nigla is going to be more proper because it's going to be affected by Chassidus. 1 second. That's seemingly a downgrade for the Chassidus. If Chassidus is here to elevate your nigla. He says no. Because at the end of the day, we already said earlier, there's an advantage in our way of elevating over Yaakov's. There's an advantage in Milmatel Maila over Milmatel Lamata. Why? That the Welt itself should be a Keli Shataka understanding the hair. You need Sof kol sof, you need the lower way, and therefore Yeshloimar. When Pnimis HaTorah, which is completely above, is able to affect Nigla in a positive way, is able to affect that Birur Milmata L'mayla. Sagt the Rebbe. The fact it's able to elevate, first of all, the learning of Nigla and the birur that's done through the learning, the refinement, right? You stay a little bit above Velt. So now, even the Chassidus is greater because the Chassidus was able to go down and make the world a Keli Felikus. So when the Chassidus can enhance the Nigla, the Chassidus is enhanced as well. The Chol Bonayich, the first half of the pasuk is again the advantage, the mile, the beauty of learning Torah. So the first half of the pasuk is dealing with Pnimis HaTorah, Momailo, Yaakov Avinu. There's a reality where the world doesn't exist, and therefore I'm able to, so to speak, have an impact on the world without actually getting down there. Nevertheless, the pasuk says, Bonayich. There's another half of the pasuk here. You're not just a child, you're a builder. You need to refine the world through learning Torah. Why? Because when a person is going to impact the world in a positive way, he's going to elevate the Torah itself. In other words, the Torah, which is above Veld, is elevated when you can somehow manage to infuse Elam Hazid, infuse the surroundings with this Torah, with the Pnimis HaTorah. Lachem Varim Saim, yet Nasa Elias HaTorah Kameshim Sad Atzmo, Lachem Varim Saim Maamar, Shlei in the Bonayich. Therefore, the Vita Kappa concludes that through Bonayich, through affecting the world, Benoyim Ma'isim Miran Shal the Talmid Chacham, who are again busy with creating and founding the world, they themselves will have the greatest aliyah, because when Torah could lower itself from its own standards and elevate the world and convince the world and make the world a hair, the Torah, the Pnimis HaTorah, is elevated as well. So that's our Maamar. Just a very quick summary. The pasuk has two parts. The first part is the Torah itself. There's a birur that comes from Torah, which is completely above world. The second half of the pasuk is dealing with V'rav Shal Bonayich, how the Talmid Chacham affect the world around them. The Friedrich Rebbe tells us that through affecting the world around you, you bring peace to yourself as well. And the explanation that Rebbe gave throughout the whole middle of the Maamar is you have Yaakov. Yaakov is Momayla Lamata. You have, and therefore he goes first to love and then to Esav. He's working through his mind and his heart. There's our Avodah typically today where we're working our way upwards, Mamata Lamayla, therefore we are going to be the ones to complete Yaakov. We're going to bring Esav, right? And we can first of all learn from Yaakov's way to practically incorporate in our life this idea of Lamayla. We can learn Chassidus. We can learn within Chassidus itself, Bir HaMeichin, because we can have a taste of the Gula. And when that foundation of Chassidus is able to anchor and able to complete your Nigla, the Chassidus is elevated as well. When the Talmid Chacham is able to bring Shalom into the world, the Talmid Chacham is elevated. Each have a wonderful day.